The wind outside howled through the forest like a wounded animal. And the lumberjack, his axe strapped to his back and his boots caked in mud, stumbled across the jagged cliffs until his eyes caught the black mouth of a cave. He had been wandering for hours, seeking shelter from the merciless cold, his breath spilling out in heavy clouds, his hands stiff even beneath his worn leather gloves. With a grunt, he stepped into the cave, clutching the torch he had fashioned from a pine branch and resin, and as the first sparks flared into flame, the shadows retreated into the rock walls around him. He believed he was alone, that this dark cavern would offer nothing more than stone, silence and a reprieve from the chill. Yet the air felt strange, warmer than it should, and the scent of smoke lingered faintly, as if fire had already lived here before his own. His instincts, sharpened from years of working the forests and surviving their trials, told him something was not right. He pushed deeper into the cave, his boots crunching against gravel, his torch casting long, trembling shadows that made the stone walls appear alive. And then, in the deeper chamber, he froze. There before him, crouched near a fire pit that glowed with smoldering embers, was a woman. Her skin caught the firelight like bronze, her dark hair spilling down her back in thick waves, her eyes glinting like obsidian as they met his. She wore garments stitched of leather strips, decorated with bones and feathers, her body language alert, a predator ready to spring if need be. The lumberjack tightened his grip on the torch, his jaw clenching, but the woman did not move toward him. She rose slowly, her back straight, her chin lifted, every movement dignified and deliberate. He saw the strength in her, the kind that comes from loss and survival, and he realized he was standing before someone who belonged to this cave in a way he never could. For a long moment neither spoke. The only sound was the faint crackling of fire, and the echo of water dripping somewhere deeper in the cavern. Finally her voice cut through the silence, low and steady, carrying the weight of someone who had seen too much. "You do not belong here," she said. The lumberjack shifted the torch, illuminating more of her figure, and he noticed scars along her arm, the kind made by battles with both man and nature. He swallowed hard and replied, his voice rough from the cold, "I seek only warmth. I'll not take what is yours." She studied him for a moment longer, as if measuring the truth of his words. Then, with the faintest nod, she gestured to the fire. The lumberjack hesitated, then moved closer, lowering himself to sit across from her, his torch planted into the earth beside him. The warmth reached his bones, and he allowed himself a slow exhale, though his eyes never left hers. The silence between them was heavy, filled with questions neither dared ask. At last he spoke again. "I thought this place empty. I did not mean to intrude." Her eyes softened, though her posture remained guarded. "The world outside is not safe for me. Here the cave keeps me alive. It has been my home since—" She paused, her gaze drifting toward the flames, her jaw tightening. The lumberjack did not press, but he understood. He had seen that kind of grief before, in men who had lost everything to storms, accidents, and wars. He realized she was a widow, a survivor clinging to solitude because the world had taken too much already. Something inside him stirred, not pity but respect. Hours slipped by as the storm outside raged on, and the two sat in uneasy truce. Occasionally she added wood to the fire, moving with quiet grace. The lumberjack watched, fascinated by the way she carried herself, each motion deliberate, each glance full of meaning. He told her little about himself, only that he worked the forests, that he felled trees and hauled logs, that his life was one of sweat and survival. She in turn revealed fragments, how her people had once roamed freely, how her husband had been taken by violence, how she had come to this cave not by choice, but by necessity. Her voice never broke, but the pain in her words was like a shadow behind her eyes. As the night deepened, the fire burned brighter, casting strange patterns on the cave walls. The lumberjack felt a strange energy between them, a fragile connection born not of trust, but of shared solitude. He could feel her measuring him, weighing whether he was a threat or an ally, a stranger passing through or someone who might shatter the fragile refuge she had built. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, or whether he would even be welcome to stay until dawn. But he knew this. The cave was no longer just stone and firelight. It was alive with presence, and he was no longer alone. The lumberjack barely slept that night, his back against the cool stone, the fire crackling between him and the mysterious widow who seemed carved from the spirit of the cave itself. Every time he drifted near slumber, the shuffle of her movements or the flicker of her silhouette in the firelight reminded him he was a guest, not an owner of this place. When dawn crept faintly through the cracks of the cave's entrance, the storm had passed, leaving the world outside hushed and blanketed in mist. He stirred, stretching stiff limbs, and found her already awake, crouched by the embers, coaxing them back to flame, with the ease of someone who had repeated this ritual countless times. Her eyes flicked toward him, calm yet sharp, as though she had never allowed herself to let her guard down even for a heartbeat. He rose slowly, adjusting the belt at his waist, and for the first time truly saw her in the clarity of morning. She was no fragile exile hiding from the world, but a woman who had carved her existence from stone and fire, her strength etched into every scar, her resilience in every glance. He wanted to thank her for the fire, for allowing him to remain through the night, but words felt heavy in the cave's silence. She broke it first. "You survived the storm," she said evenly, "but storms come and go. Survival is not only about the weather." The lumberjack tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Her gaze shifted toward the cave mouth, where mist lingered like a living curtain. "There are men who come this way," she said, her voice quieter but no less firm. "Hunters, wanderers, thieves. Some know I am here. They think a woman alone in the wild is easy prey. They are wrong, but their greed always returns. You walked into my refuge last night uninvited. If I had thought you were one of them, you would not be breathing now." The weight of her words settled over him like stone. He had no doubt she could kill if survival demanded it, and in her eyes he saw not cruelty but certainty. Still, he did not flinch. "I am no thief," he said, "no hunter of widows. I came only to escape the cold, nothing more." She studied him for a long moment, searching his face as though peeling away every false layer. Finally, she nodded slightly and turned back to the fire. "Then you may leave when you wish. The world beyond still belongs to men like you." "Mine does not." Yet he did not rise. Something tethered him to that cavern, something deeper than warmth or refuge. He could not explain it, but the silence between them no longer felt hostile. Instead, it carried the weight of possibility, like a path hidden in the forest waiting to be discovered. He cleared his throat softly. "And if I don't wish to leave just yet?" The question hung bold in the cave air. She froze, her hand tightening on the stick she used to stoke the fire. Slowly she turned, her eyes locking onto his. "Then you risk becoming part of a story that was never meant for you." Her words should have been a warning, but instead they pulled him closer. He leaned forward, voice softer now, reverent. "Maybe my story has been waiting for this one." For the first time since he entered, her expression shifted, a flicker of surprise in her dark gaze. She masked it quickly, steel returning to her face. "Careful, Lumberjack," she said, her tone edged with caution. "Stories can bind tighter than chains, and I have no chains left to give." The hours that followed unfolded differently than the night before. She no longer treated him as a trespasser, but as an intruder tolerated, one who might prove himself worthy of staying. She spoke of the cave, how she had shaped it into more than stone, how the spirits of her people still echoed in its depths, how her grief lived in her bones but no longer ruled her. He listened, silence never empty but attentive, and in return he spoke of the forests, of trees that scraped the sky, of winters endured by sheer will, of the loneliness that grew like moss in a man's chest when he spent too many years with only his axe for company. By midday they shared food, dried meat she had stored, wild roots she had gathered. When she passed him a portion, her fingers brushed his briefly, a contact so slight it could have been accidental, yet it lingered in his mind like a spark, catching on dry bark. He caught her watching him more than once, her gaze unreadable, her posture still guarded but softer at the edges. The cave no longer felt like hers alone. It was becoming something fragile, balanced precariously between two lives colliding by chance. As evening drew near, the lumberjack realized he no longer thought of leaving. The wilderness outside held nothing but repetition. Trees to cut, logs to haul, nights to endure. But here in this hidden place carved into stone lived a woman whose presence stirred something he had thought buried long ago. He did not yet know if she would allow him to remain, if she would ever lower her walls enough to let him step fully into her world. Yet he knew this. The cave had revealed more than shelter. It had revealed the possibility of belonging, and that was rarer than warmth in winter. And as the firelight danced once more across their faces, the widow's eyes caught his in the glow, holding them longer than before. For the first time since he arrived, she did not tell him to leave.